So I would like to give you a quick introduction on the work we carry out in my lab. Please go to the next slide. So the framework is essentially the life circle of a star and the corresponding molecular complexity. And if you go to the next slide, according to the exogenous delivery theory about the origin of life, the prebiotic molecular content developed in the interstellar medium could be sent to our planet. And so our focus is, please, the next slide, is on dense cloud, which are also called molecular cloud, where we have a very low temperature and a very low density. Next slide, please. And so here you have a sketch of how to perform a characterization from a chemical point of view of the chemistry of a molecular cloud. So first of all, you need to know the census of the molecule present, their abundance, and then we needed to understand how they were formed and how can further react. And then all the information should be put together in order to derive a chemical network and running astrochemical model that should be able to explain the molecular content. Next slide, please. In this slide, highlighted in yellow, are the 3 steps which are part of our research lines in the field of astrochemistry. Let me start from the first point. Yeah, next slide. So the characterization of molecules, so the discovery of new molecule in space. In the next slide, you can see part of the big table collecting all the molecules discovered so far in the interstellar medium and circumstellar shells. And we have more than 300 molecules nowadays. And please go to the next slide. Most of them, more than 90% of these molecules have been discovered by radio astronomy, which means to observe the rotational emissions. Next slide, please. And this is the strategy we applied in my lab. So we rely on strong interplay between experiment and theory for the characterization of the rotational spectra of candidates for astronomical detection. We set up the accurate line catalog, which is at the basis of the radioastronomical search. In the next slide, you can see one significant example. This was the characterization of the rotational spectra of the Z isomer of 1,2-ethanediol. Next slide, please, which is thought to be an important intermediate in the formation of sugar within the RNA world hypothesis. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned, the starting point is the interplay of experiment and theory. So we needed to simulate the spectra. Next slide, please. Here you can see in orange the simulated spectrum. I don't go into detail. And then, yes, next slide. Once you have the simulated spectrum, you have to compare with the experimental one, which is the black in this case, and which is very crowded because you also have side products, co-pyrolysis products, and products from isomerization. And the reason is, please, next slide, that this molecule is an unstable one. You can cannot buy. And it's produced by pyrolysis, flash vacuum pyrolysis. And we have two setup. In particular, in this case, we used the one on the right, the external pyrolysis over. Please, next slide. And here on the top right, you can see the synthesis we carry out inside the oven. And as you see, we had to adjust the temperature of the precursor and the temperature of the oven in order to have the best signal to noise ratio. Next slide, please. So once we found the perfect condition, we recorded the spectrum in a large range, and the assignment was interpreted and in terms of an FT Hamiltonian, and this led to the setup of the line spectral catalog. And here you can see the comparison between the line spectral catalog within the LTE approximation and the radioastronomical observation. This was actually a detection of this molecule in the G6093 molecular cloud. Next slide, please. Another example is the tentative detection of allylamine isomers. Next slide, please. Allylamine in general are important intermediate in the Straker synthesis. Next slide, please. And allylamine has two isomers, the trans and the cis, and for both we have the syn and anti. Next slide, please. And this in red, you see the prediction based on very old and very low frequency measurement. And in black, the spectrum we record. As you see, there is no match at all. Next slide, please. The reason is that you needed to go higher in frequency in order to include more parameters in the effective Hamiltonian, those are related to centrifugal distortion. And you see already incorporated the computed one, the interpretation of the spectrum is by far clear. And next one, and you see this is the final analysis of the spectrum. So once again, we set up a catalog. Next slide, please. We could observe both forms of the trans isomer, but not the cis one. This the reason is related to the high energy of the cis one. Next slide, please. They lie, as you can see, very high in energy, and we couldn't find them. With the catalog from the spectroscopic study in hand, next slide, please, we could tentatively assign this two form of the transalinimine in the same molecular cloud as it before. Tentative cloud because you see limited the number of unblended or very partially blended feature. In this case, allylamine was produced with the setup shown in the left side, so the one surrounding the cell. Next slide, please. And so these two examples should be able to give you an idea of the interplay, even if I was very fast, the interplay of experimental theory in predicting and analysis aspect, setting up the catalog to guide the astronomical observation and the detection. Then once you have a detection, you have to understand the amount of the molecule, so its abundance. And next slide, please. If you can consider that the LTE, local thermodynamic equilibrium approximation, is valid, then you can, for instance, use the rotational diagram. Next slide, please. So you report the integrated intensity of different transition observed in the astronomical spectrum as a function of the upper energy level of the transition, and you obtain this linear fit. The intercept give you the column density n, but you need to know the partition function, and sometimes this requires accurate calculation as well. And from the slope you derive the excitation temperature. However, next slide please. As mentioned at the very beginning, the density in molecular clouds is very low. This means the collision can compete with the radiative processes, and in such a condition, you need to know the collision coefficient for deriving with a better accuracy the column density. Next slide, please. Here you have a real, very recent example, PO+. PO+ is the second one molecule containing the PO bond, which is important in the field of astrobiology. So far discovered in the interstellar medium. Using the LTE approximation, the column density was by far greater. And in this study, we investigated the collision excitation of PO+ by molecular hydrogen, which is the main perturber in molecular cloud. Next slide, please. This is something that very extensive from a computational point of view, because you have to accurately investigate the interaction potential energy surface between your target molecule and the collider. And once you have this, next slide, please, you can, using, for instance, a full quantum closed clapping calculation, derive all the collisional information you required. Next slide, please. And so the next step is to understand how these molecules are formed in space. Next slide, please. And so the starting point is, of course, to decide the environment. So we have essentially two possibilities. The reaction can occur in the gas phase or on the dust grain. We have so far no know-how about the reactivity on grain, so we carry out only simulation on the gas phase. Next slide, please. And so here is the recipe. You select the precursor, and the selection is based on essentially your final aim, which means if you are interested in explaining why a molecule is has been detected, or you want, maybe you would like to predict new potential candidates for detection. Then you need to accurately at a low level sampling of all of the reactive potential energy surface. Then you retain only the open paths and improve the stationary points. And then once you have the structure of the stationary point improved, you need to further improve the energetics, because we are working at a very low temperature, so the energetics is really so the barrier we have in the energetics are really important, because kinetics is really sensitive to them. And the final answer, so the final word is provided by kinetic calculation. Only at that time you can be sure that the molecule can be formed in the interstellar medium. Next slide, please. And because of the constraining, mainly the low temperature, the open paths I mentioned before are those that have a barrierless approach. and all the barriers that can be present in the pathway need to be submerged, and of course overall the reaction should be an exothermic one. Next slide, please. And this is a very recent example. We investigated different reaction in order to explain the presence of the transformic acid, thioformic acid, the trans HCOSH isomer that has been detected in the interstellar medium. Next slide, please. This was the reaction between formaldehyde and the OH radical, was the only one that fulfilled the three conditions I mentioned before. And this indeed is able to explain the formation. Next slide, please. The formation of the product we are interested in. So in the within the highlighted rectangular, the observed one is the isomer of thioformic acid on the left side, and but also in our molecule, as you can see, other isomer of thioformic acid are formed, those containing the CS double bond. Then we move to kinetics. Next slide, please. And you see the detected isomer of formic acid is the second faster product in the kinetics. Interesting. Next one. Next slide, please. Yeah, the fastest process lead to the formation of the transform containing the CS double bond. For this molecule, next slide, there is no spectroscopic information so far. And so spectroscopic characterization is in progress because at this point, this molecule is a very good candidate for astronomical detection. Next slide, please. So this is the end. Of course, all the work I in a very fast way I presented so far has been done by my group. So in red you see the those that are mainly involved in the experiment, and in the darker gray frame those that are mainly involved in the theoretical part. And of course, next slide, I have to thank the collaborator, those that contributed to the work I presented. For instance, Paolo Caselli at the MPA in Garking, Caro Cavallotti for kinetics at the Polytechnic of Milan. Jean-Claude Guillemin is our guy for the production of the precursor for the pyrolysis experiment. François Lick is our collaborator, a mentor for the non-LTE, so the collisional work, and Victor Viglia is our astronomer of reference. And then next slide, I have of course to thank the funding agency, and next slide, you for your attention. Thank you.